I experienced sexual abuse from my cousin when I was little. He was my babysitter, and yeah, it started at a young age, and it definitely affected me. And I kept it a secret for quite a few years, and then when I thought I found someone that I could trust to tell, who I thought was a friend, he ended up telling people at school, and I was picked on and bullied for being molested, you know, like, that's twisted. So I became part of the crowd with the kids that were making bad choices. So I was kicked out of the family home, and it's all because they never dealt with that trauma. You know, it's the 60s scoop, the residential schools, child services, the young offenders jails, you know, lost, angry people getting lost in a system, and not knowing how to ask for help, not having developed that part of their brain because of the addiction. It took over, and they lost everything, themselves most importantly. I'm just looking forward to the people that are going to receive these lanyards and learn a little bit about me and my story. And the number one thing is awareness. You know, it happens to a lot of people, and it damages their lives, and it changes who they are as people and who they have the potential to become as individuals.
One of the things that I find interesting is we look at people's life in a single moment when it comes to criminality, and we lay charges and convict them based upon an event that occurred without looking at the entire circumstance. 88% of my male sample experienced violent victimization prior to their first detected offense. That means that prior to them ever being in trouble with the police, they were victimized violently 88% of the time. For young men, they experience violence, sexual violence, 33% of the time. That means 1 in 3 young men incarcerated in provincial prisons were victims of sexual assault. When you start to look at the female population, you look at the victimization and trauma of the female population, that increases significantly when it comes to sexual violence. 77% of the female population that is incarcerated in remand center experienced sexual violence at least once, and most of the, often multiple times, prior to their very first detected offense and jail sentence. So what you have is you have really happening when they're children, adverse childhood experiences and trauma that sets them on a course down into criminality, addictions, health factors, all as a result of adverse childhood experiences and youthful trauma.
It was really a big team effort, a lot of different organizations and individuals coming together to put on the 3-day event.
So Trauma Informed Edmonton is a group of agencies who recognize that there is a gap in our perception of the care that we're giving to clients who might be very vulnerable, and the way that we're implementing this care. So Trauma Informed Edmonton really is about helping people to recognize and understand that we still have a lot of room to grow and to learn, and to help support people in the best way possible that we can.
It's an event about addressing trauma, which is one of the things I think the system's failed to do in a really holistic and systematic way. It's about educating people on trauma, having a better understanding of it, and looking at how trauma affects people, and how people that work in the systems can actually have positive effect on individuals that have suffered trauma, whether it's a short period of time or through their life course.
We need to stop just talking about trauma-informed care, but actually doing something different, because a lot of people talk about it, but things don't necessarily change when just because you're talking about it.
Trauma Informed Edmonton has really been deliberate about educating the public about trauma, about historic trauma with Indigenous people, about the trauma of newcomers, and about trauma behaviors. And it's important to do that, especially for frontline workers who have to engage with people who present with trauma behaviors that look like non-compliance, that look like disengagement, that look like addictions. And so that's always been something we've tried to do. And with this event, we took it a step further. We wanted people who worked with individuals who carried trauma to not just have a context for those individuals that they work with, but also to have a look at perhaps their own trauma and how their own trauma may actually become a barrier to working with people who've been affected by trauma.
I would say that you're building a foundation for service providers to understand what trauma-informed training looks like.
So we've had conferences in the past, and you know, the turnout was great. The subjects that we touched on were extraordinary, but we really wanted to take it that step further to help people to understand their own trauma and how that can actually affect their work with individuals, can become a barrier to a healthy working relationship, can become a barrier to working with clients in a way that they're self-determining, and also to be aware of the need to take care of ourselves. If we're not healthy, how can we help people to become healthy?
When the committee, the Trauma Informed Edmonton Committee came together, we looked at this very intentionally because we want the training to be something that people will walk away with, that they embody.
We wanted to reach 150 frontline service providers and give them this experience. It wasn't a workshop, it wasn't a conference, it was a gathering. It was a gathering to touch people on an emotional level.
At each of the days, we have an elder. And that representation is about the sacredness of this work. We forget about that. We forget about how supporting each other is really a sacred piece of our humanity. And so that was very important, not only for a day where we're talking about historical trauma, because the other days there's focus on addiction and there's focus on brain development and a number of other subjects. But the elder stands with us, reminding us that we are on a path as human beings with each other.
What we say in our ceremony is when we're opening a gathering like this, when I do a smudge or when there's a prayer offered, the notion behind that is why we're here. We will suspend judgment. While we are here, we will open our hearts. That's the same therapeutic approach that we need to use with our client base.
Our approach is to kind of, bring in a little bit of heavy and then bring in a little bit of resource or a little bit of humor, or to kind of move it along and keep everybody kind of comfortable and not too overactivated or triggered, or else not too kind of dorsal or sleeping.
For me to share, like I have shared some intimate things with this group so that I can make my point, but it also heals me. I want to mention that, maybe 11 years ago, going on 12 years, my oldest boy, who was 22, committed suicide. He hanged himself. He was on crystal meth. I fell apart, and I was a strong leader, and I was, upstanding member of my community, and I fell apart, and I isolated, I self-destructed, I did drugs, and I really did some really, horrible things. So this talking and sharing here has given me an opportunity to even make myself stronger in relation to sharing with others how my hurt has been and how I can come out of that and how others can come out of that.
The more you know why hurt people, the more helpful you can help people to start to work from a level of healing themselves, and then they become the element of healing around them. So we can keep having these influences after, but how do we kind of get in front of it? How do we be proactive? And a big part of that I found is how trauma-informed you are.
I like that we're based in community. I think that that's really cool. I like that we're incorporating ceremony at the beginning of each day, so we're getting grounded when we're coming in. And I like that you've intentionally split us from our organizations and put us with other people. I'm meeting a lot of other stakeholders that I hadn't before.
I think the smaller groups make it way easier to connect with people and way easier to have more of an intimate conversation about a topic that can be upsetting and triggering for people in the room. So I think it's important to have that small group. It makes it a safer space.
This venue here, coming to be able to speak at this event over these last 3 days, allows me to do two things. Pass along some information, humanize the Edmonton Police a little bit, and hopefully create some considerations or some dialogue for other organizations about what they can do to better work and help their injured staff.
Incredibly insightful in dealing with clients that come with complex histories. I hadn't really thought of that way before. I feel like I can better support my staff to do the work that they need to do on the front line, and that's what matters.
These types of events, I feel, are not only about the message, but about how we're conveying the message. And what I saw was that the conveyance of the messages was done very respectfully. People were very respectful in the room. That's how we grow. That's how we grow as a group and as a community.
People coming with open minds and wanting to share and wanting to learn together so that we can make a change and make it better for our children, our children's children, so that you know, some of those hurts of the past don't get repeated. And in some ways, you know, it's going to be a lot of work, but we're doing it kind of one little step at a time. So.
The first day was fantastic, all the humor they implemented, and just realize that the community, we're all part of a community, and it takes a whole community to raise a healthy person.
And then to end off with an actual teaching where people get to watch a teepee be put up, where it's something that you're not Googling, you're actually experiencing. So it's part of your journey, and you have the right now to go out and tell everybody what you learned because you've experienced something together. So it's exciting.
Watching the poles go up on the TV, for sure. Yesterday, I've never seen that before. I've gotten teachings inside of teepees before, but I've never seen or heard the different teachings around the poles and how they went up, and I really enjoyed that.
It stays nice and soft.
And so I feel this format was very successful and can be emulated again to make sure we continue on with sticking true to that goal of communication and understanding each other. So I feel there's not much that could be improved upon because I think it went really, really well.
Just before this interview, I actually sent a text to the rest of my team saying, like, it'd be nice if our senior management some members of our senior management had actually attended this, right? Because I think it could inform policy from the people that actually can make those changes at the top to trickle down through the organizations, yeah.
When you go to that program, that workshop, I just hope that it gives you a better understanding that some people aren't the way they are because they want to be. It's because of things that have happened to them in the past that sometimes they had no control over. There is light at the end of the tunnel. With the money from this contract, I'm going to be investing it into Canvas, and I'm going to learn the art of making teepees.